Alright you guys, welcome back to another video on mental health topics with Matt. That's me, for those of you who don't know. Just a quick about me, or about the channel in general. Why does this channel even exist? Basically, I'm just a 24-year-old patient diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, bipolar II disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and panic disorder. So I have several years of experiencing these symptoms, and yeah, they're not fun. And one of the biggest things I notice is that there are a lot of YouTube channels that are really helpful to me, that I subscribe to and follow, that are professionals, in the field. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's phenomenal. That they take the time to do these amazing videos that they do. I'm eternally grateful. But this channel here is more on my take. It's a lot of research-based, evidence-based, whatever you want to call it. I use real definitions. I look up real statistics. I do try to make it educational. And interesting to watch, with visual effects and things like that. And today's video, it's going to be a pretty serious topic. I like to think all my videos are serious topics, but, that's beside the point. Today, if you can't tell by the title, we are going to talk about self-harm. What it is, what it isn't. Some examples, terminology, and what you can do to help somebody who might be engaging in these behaviors that you might know. So I'm going to throw my face over here, and let's get started. Okay, so in all my videos, I always think it's very important to define what we're talking about, right? It's hard to really talk about something, especially something scientific or medical, if you don't really know what it is, right? So I figured it would be a good idea to start with the bare basics of what it is, some other names for self-harm that you might see in literature, including, NSSI, non-suicidal self-injury, self-mutilation, self-injury, or of course self-harm. From here on out, I'll just call it self-harm because who the hell wants to say non-suicidal self-injury every minute in a video? Not me. So now that we know some alternate names for what it's called, it's good to know the definition, which luckily in this video, in this example, is going to be pretty basic for this topic. Basically, self-harm is simply causing deliberate harm to the body by various methods. There's no one method that I think is better or worse. Well, worse or more noteworthy than any others. I think they're all very serious and should be treated as such. But some of the most common ones that you'll probably see or hear of, cutting, burning, hitting somebody, yourself, or head banging into a wall, scratching persistently the skin, either to cause bleeding or wounds, or even to prevent those previous wounds from healing. And even starving yourself as a form of punishment also would technically count as a form of self-harm. Now, of course, it would have to be in the context of not being part of an eating disorder or something like that. But, again, yes, it is actually possible to consider that as a form of self-harm. So now that we kind of defined what it is, some examples, and other ways it's defined, next it's important to know who is at risk for self-harm. Now, I know what you're thinking. Isn't that just what the emos and goths do? Well, no. If you've seen my previous video, I don't think it was the last one. I think it was 2 or 3 before that. It's probably the mental health myth-busting one, the first one I did, where I discussed the myth that only emos and goths self-harm, that sort of thing. It's only done for attention and all of that. Well, first addressing the part of who is at risk. The first most important thing you can take away from this video is that anyone can engage in self-harm behavior. Not just the stereotyped groups. Anyone. And of course, there are some groups that may be at an increased risk, right? We're not going to say that everyone's on a level playing field. There are some people who have more of a risk than others. For example, we have abuse victims, whether it's sexual, physical, or emotional abuse, it really doesn't matter. It's incredibly prevalent among a population of victims that have undergone those sorts of scenarios. Major life stressors, losing a person in their life or a job that they were committed to, can bring about feelings like this, and even other comorbid mental disorders, such as borderline personality disorder, anxiety disorders, depression, or PTSD. One thing to note in terms of other comorbid mental disorders, or at least the ones listed here, is that the only actual mental disorder in the DSM that actually uses self-harm as a diagnostic criteria to diagnose it is BPD. I feel like I mentioned that in one of the previous videos I did on BPD, but just in case I didn't, and just bringing it up here again because it is good to know that only BPD is a mental disorder in the DSM that will list self-harm as an actual diagnostic criteria. Of course, there are 9 diagnostic criteria for BPD in the DSM, and you need to have at least 5 of the 9 to be diagnosed. So it's not that we don't see it with any other mental illness, because clearly, of course, we do, but this is the only one where it's actually used as a diagnostic criteria, which is interesting. So now that we know that anyone can engage in self-harm behavior, but there are some groups who have a higher risk, the next question you're probably thinking is, okay, well, if anyone can do it, why? Why would they? Fair enough question, right? Well, I would have to say first that it's very good to know that there's no single reason why someone engages in self-harm behavior, and that no reason really is more important or significant or serious than the others. Again, every reason or any reason is very serious and should be treated as such. But some common reasons that you'll probably see or hear a lot. Using it as a coping mechanism to manage intense psychological pain, to feel something when you're emotionally blunted or numb, and to feel a sense of control over your body, your mind, or just your life in general when things seem to be all going wrong. And even a form of self-punishment for something that you as the individual who's engaging in the behavior perceives as a fault of themselves. Perhaps they really are self-conscious of themselves, or they have a really bad self-hatred towards themselves. They might act out because of that. Again, this is not every reason in the world why someone could commit or participate in these behaviors, but these are some pretty prevalent ones. And for me personally, to kind of interject myself into my videos a bit, I started self-harming in 8th grade, and it was totally, pretty much 100% because of bullying. I dressed like a rock star. I wore the Hot Topic blue and red skinny jeans and band shirts and super long hair. Total rock star mode, right? I've been drumming since 5th grade, so I was already several years in at that point, total musician. And yeah, apparently I dressed gay. I don't know. But that's what they all said, all the kids. So bullying was really, really bad for me personally. And honestly, I can't exactly tell you where I found out about self-harm. But that's why. That's why I started. And in later years, after like my dad was murdered and things like that 4 years ago, started back up again. After several years of being clean, or whatever term I guess people use for self-harm, not engaging in it. Really, out of these 4, I would kind of say it went from being really, really depressed and trying to feel something. And then as like BPD symptoms came up starting at like 18, and being really jealous of friends when they spent time with other friends, fearing that they were going to ditch me for the other friends, and that's still an ongoing issue. It's still an ongoing fear, for sure. But it got away from not really feeling anything, and all of a sudden everything is so intense and constantly going in and out. It's really, really tough because, the BPD. And then, of course, you combine hypomania on top of that, with the bipolar, and it's just, some days it's ridiculous. So, yeah, I would say that's really kind of what it gravitated towards as I got older. Less of the depressing just numbness, and I need to feel something, into trying to manage intense psychological pain. I've always described it as trying to take emotional pain and turn it into physical pain, right? I can handle physical pain. I have control over physical pain. But psychological pain, it's just in your head, And if you start spending so much time in your head, well, it's going to get to you eventually. So that's basically my personal interjection there. So here we go on to the last topic. So, given everything you've just learned or kind of been exposed to about self-harm, what do you do to try to help someone who is self-harming? Again, the very most important thing that this video, I want you to take from the video, is that anyone can engage in self-harm, right? As we discussed previously, there are a variety of reasons why. And it can be environmental issues, abuse, life situations, things like that. And it can be a result of serious mental illness, in the case of BPD, or depression, or anxiety. So you might feel like there is a person who is engaging, a person who knows someone who is engaging in these behaviors. But there are actually some things you can definitely do to help. And some of them might be a little more obvious, and some of them might actually be kind of the opposite of what you would think would be helpful. So the very first thing I would recommend on any mental health video that I would ever make probably is to do lots of research. Do all the homework and research you can on the topic, right? Because the more knowledgeable you are about something, the more you know how you're going to best be able to help someone. You can't really walk somebody through something if you don't even know what it is they're going through, right? And with that being said, you do have to eventually come to a realization that you're never really going to be able to fully understand everything. You're not going to understand every reason why they engage in a behavior. You're not going to understand why they can't stop necessarily. But you should try your best to do so. And again, doing lots of research on your part will come in handy when it comes to trying to understand the best you can. But again, realize there's no real way, unless you've engaged and experienced these behaviors yourself, it's probably very hard to rationalize just exactly how cutting your skin or engaging in some risk behavior could possibly be helpful. But the most important thing, again, is do not judge. Anyone can engage in these behaviors. That happens to the best of us and the worst of us. And there are many reasons why. And just try to be understanding and encouraging and a good support person. Another key thing would be to be a good, active listener. Now, you might think that the person might want you to talk a lot to them about whatever. But honestly, for a lot of people with mental illness, myself included, a lot of the times with my friends, I like to run things by them. like just life things, or like I kind of just bounce ideas off of people. It's just kind of how I operate. And I'm sure when they watch this, they'll say the same thing. Yes, he does. But it's true. I really just want them to listen and kind of get feedback on something that's kind of like, internal struggle in my head kind of thing. So just being a good listener and not being afraid to ask questions, but I would try to make them relevant or pertinent questions to what they're talking about, as opposed to just bombarding someone with questions. They're not really going to want to talk to you again about it. And just try to keep an open mind. And again, doing lots of research and trying your best to understand and be there for them is going to be very helpful, of course. And if nothing else, remember that they are a person first, right? At no point during the day do I walk up to somebody and say, "Hi, I'm bipolar disorder. How are you?" No. I am me. I am Matt, and I have borderline personality disorder or bipolar disorder, whatever. Notice I didn't say I am bipolar. I am borderline. I am depressed. When people refer to people like that, it's very stigmatizing because it just sounds like all they are is their mental illness and there's nothing else about them. And especially when it comes to something like BPD, a personality disorder of all things that encompasses every aspect of who you are and how you look at yourself and how you think other people look at you. I mean, that's very insensitive way of putting it. They have a condition, but they are so much more than a condition. And in speaking to somebody, that's very important to try to remember. I'm a musician. I've been playing drums for 16 years now. I play guitar, video games. I like hanging out with friends. I like watching TV shows and movies. There's a lot more to me than just I suffer with mental illness. It's not to discredit the pain in the ass that mental illness is and how much it does affect my day-to-day life. But there's more to me than that. And again, that's very important to remember as well. Alright, so you made it to the end of the video. So I really do hope you enjoyed the video. And yeah, definitely have many more of these planned. And I really hope you enjoyed. If you do like the video, please give it a thumbs up. And check out my channel for my previous videos on mental health topics. And also, you can check out the Instagram post over there for the new page I created for this channel. The name, as you can see, is the same as the channel name to try to keep it simple. And yeah, tried to follow a lot of the same pages I follow for mental health topics on my main Instagram page. I tried to add them on this page so that I can reach more people with my videos. Again, I really enjoy making them, and I enjoy recording and everything. Everything is done in one take, by the way, in case you were wondering. I don't do fancy editing after the fact and stuff. It's minimal, if that. I set stuff up, I talk over it, and that's basically what you get. So, yeah. So definitely subscribe if you want to see future videos. And, yeah, enjoy. See you in the next one. Bye.